This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, and today I'm joined by a good friend, a new friend. I've only known a few months, but we could easily talk for hours upon hours for this episode, but we did keep it as short as we could. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. We talk a ton about education on today's episode, and I'm sure you guys are going to love it, and we'd love to hear your feedback after you're done listening to it, so please reach out with that. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please enjoy this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of the great state of New York, Mimosa Jones Tunney, who's the president and founder of the Schoolhouse. And I came across her just a few months ago, and she was down in Florida, and she's opening up a second location of her school in Vero Beach. And my wife and I went and looked at it, absolutely loved it, love what they're doing. And I was like, she's got to be on the podcast. She's got so much knowledge, so much experience, and just a delight to talk to. So I knew I had to have her on, and so we have her on today, but I won't take any more of her thunder. I want her to introduce herself. So Mimosa, welcome to the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much, Mitch. It was so nice to meet you and your wife. And we're on a mission to revolutionize education in the United States. We think there's room for a new American school to replace traditional school in the United States of America. And we've started in New York. We've started to pivot down to Florida as well. My background is, I've been a writer for many, many years. I started off on Capitol Hill, worked for the governor of Nevada, worked for Aaron Sorkin. And while I was writing a miniseries for HBO, came across Dr. Montessori. And I started to deep dive into Montessori's work from a historical perspective. What was happening in education in the late 1800s and the early 1900s? I always want to say that I separate Dr. Montessori's work from Montessori schools, because Montessori schools can take on a whole life of their own. Dr. Montessori was a scientist who was very close friends with Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison, and she was a rock star scientist. I mean, she really put together how children learn, how we need to give dignity and respect to children, how we best approach their learning in certain sensitive periods from 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and 9 to 12. And I went down this rabbit hole of also studying some of the great pedagogical scientists in our history, and they were all saying the same thing. And around that time, I had my own child, John, who's now 11. And I just thought, how is it that we aren't progressing, number one, as a country? How is it that we've progressed in medicine and communication, in every other area? Even our toothpaste is better 100 years later, but we are still using the same antediluvian system in education. How is that? I was completely blown away that we had all this information and it wasn't getting through to people. And then secondly, I was also surprised by the fact that we have these very segmented school systems. And so we have parochial schools, and we have independent schools, and we have public schools, and we have Montessori schools, and we have Waldorf schools and Reggio Emilia. And the truth of the matter is there are great gems in each of them. And the thing that is great about the United States of America is our ability to take different things, different information, and create something new. We're a country of innovation. And so my husband and I decided to embark on this journey to create a model of what a school should be, the new American school. If you could put all these things together, have Montessori materials and philosophy, connect Reggio Emilia and their philosophy on art and parent engagement, connect Socratic seminar, because boy, do we need to learn how to talk to each other in this day and age, connect project-based learning, and still adhere to standards, because we believe that every third grader should know how to measure. We just shouldn't torture them as they learn how to measure. If we could create a curriculum that put all these things together and also encased it with a phenomenal educator culture, we could have one of the most brilliant education systems in the world, if not the most brilliant education systems in the world. And so that's what we've done. We've built the model. It's been operating for 5 years. We run on a robust wait list every year. We are arguably the best elementary school in the state of New York. And we're now looking to empower more communities to do what we've done.
I love it. Well, so many questions I want to dive into for you. First off is, do you have a country you're jealous of in their education systems, or somebody you've seen and go, man, I feel like they're doing the best in maybe the world in terms of childhood education?
Not really. I don't function like that. I mean, listen, you go to Italy and there's components of Reggio Emilia that are phenomenal. And of course, this is the birthplace of Montessori. You look at Norway and the way that they've operated their school system, and that's incredible as well. But America is a different beast. You know, we're a country of innovation. We're mostly a capitalist country. We're a melting pot. We've got 50 states and all of them are like their own micro countries. And so I'm really proud of the history of public education in the United States. You know, this was something that happened in the 1800s where people decided if we're going to give our electorate the right to vote, we're going to have to educate them, right? We moved from giving just property owners the right to vote to giving everyone the right to vote. And the powers that be at that time said, listen, if we're going to do that, we really need to make sure people are educated. And that was the basis for creating the public school system. We can see how far we've gotten from that, right? I'm not sure we have a super educated electorate at this point in the country. So in the spirit of that, the idea that the United States of America would invest this time, this energy, that we would take taxes from other people to make sure we had an educated electorate, this is an incredible experience. It's an incredible experiment. We were the only country to ever do it. And so I'm very proud of that history of education in the United States. We've just fallen so far from what the original intent was. And we've not used any of the tools that we have available to us to improve education for children here.
So if you could digest this, because you mentioned this earlier about there's little nuggets from each area, right. Reggio Emilia, Montessori, and all that. If you could put those in a quick description, what would be the nugget from Montessori, from the private sector, from Reggio Emilia, or all these Waldorf? If you could easily do that, go, hey, the nugget from Montessori is this, the nugget from private sector is this. What would those be?
Sure. Well, let's start with Dr. Montessori. I mean, she really understood that children learn when there is freedom and responsibility. So when there is choice. By the way, there are pedagogical scientists from 300 years before her who knew that too. So she was the one that kind of put it all together. The nugget from Montessori is that you want to provide choice to the child. You want the child, if you're studying any subject, to be able to say, I'm going to study it that way. I'm still going to get to the same endpoint, but I'm going to follow my own learning journey. And there's many other nuggets in Montessori that I could go into later, but that's the key one in terms of the American Emergent Curriculum and the schoolhouse that we built. Secondly, for Reggio Emilia, children express themselves, human beings express themselves artistically from 0 to 12 more than they ever will in their lives. So having an atelier, having an art space in the room, in each classroom, instead of marching children to art class for 45 minutes every week, is really essential. And in Reggio Emilia, I've been trained with Reggio Emilia in Italy. When you go there, there is a beauty. Montessori also believed this too. But in Reggio Emilia, you really see a beauty of the classrooms, right? These are the first things that they're seeing. This is the first place that they're in. They want to be inspired by learning. So we've taken that nugget. Socratic seminar, really important to learn how to be an active listener. This isn't debate. This is my point of view. This is your point of view. Maybe we can learn from each other. Maybe we should have some Socratic seminar in Congress. Maybe we could start that. That would be great. And then project-based learning is a phenomenal process by which they learn how to apply what they learn academically in real world situations, right? So we want them to understand P&Ls. We want them to understand how to start a business, how to balance a checkbook, how to cold call somebody. And when they start their own company through PBL, which our students do every year, they create either a saleable product or they create a service. They are out there in the world proving themselves, building their confidence. In terms of public school, listen, we all have great nostalgic memories about public school. So we want the spirit weeks, we want the athletics, we want the student council, we want all of those things that we remember as being part of the fabric of an American education. And in terms of private school, I like the rigor of private school. I like the uniforms of private school. It creates a spirit, a sportsmanship. There are aspects of private school where people are really held to the task. And that's important as well. We shouldn't be afraid to support our learners academically to their highest possible achievements. And sometimes when you get into these advanced pedagogical schools like Montessori and Waldorf, it's too loose, right? We still want to have standards. We still want them to be at the very top of their class, so to speak. So those are all of the aspects that we pulled from. And it was no small task to put them all into one American Emergent Curriculum. This is a big deal. And to also make it connect with educators. That was a really big process. It's one we're very proud of, and it's one that school districts and communities can use across the country.
So I love this model, obviously, because it's why we're talking. It's why we went to when you were down in Florida. If you were, and this more of a kind of get into a political question, but I've always thought, kind of like what you thought, our public school system, it is really cool what we've been able to create and what we've been able to do. But I do believe that the system itself is broken. There's broken pieces. There's definitely room for improvement. I'm sure anybody would at least admit that part. How do you see that changing over time? Is there a way to take this model, let's say this is the best model out there, and get it into Congress to go, hey, can we publicly fund this model in other states? Is that something like, that you see ever happening? And what's a way that we can start to try and better our school system that is free and publicly funded?
So that's a great question. I think it starts with community. I don't think anything, having worked in Congress, I don't think anything new ever starts with Congress. Things that are new, things that are innovative, things that are going to change the trajectory of this country happen in communities. They happen with parents, they happen in towns. I would love to get this in front of Governor DeSantis. I think on the state level in Florida, it's a great project for Florida to say, hey, let's take this American Emergent Curriculum and let's infuse it into our public schools in the state of Florida. I also think there's a trajectory of communities in Austin, Texas, or in Harrison, Nebraska, or in Utah, or in Washington State. Any group of parents, any town can contact us at theschoolhouse.org, and you can create your own school with your own curriculum. You can take one of the 40,000 public school teachers who have left the business this year. We will train them in our training center in New York. And they will come out as educators who are reimagined, because so many of them have PTSD from teaching in these environments. And they will also bring with them a new view of education, a new view of students and children and how they learn. And you can bootstrap your way up in each community without involving the public schools. Because listen, some schools are going to love this curriculum and they're going to adopt it, and we're going to help them train their educators. But some schools, I don't believe, can be reformed. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that about the whole system, but it is so entrenched in politics. It is so entrenched in everything but the child. I think it's time for us to think like entrepreneurs and innovators think in terms of American society when it comes to education. This is not a government program anymore. This needs to be infused with really smart people who have the child at the top of the food chain, and everything that follows from that will be successful.
Well, I know that with our country, we're doing a lot of stuff with school choice right now, and I know there's some stuff coming down the docket. I think that I don't know, obviously, what that's going to look like going forward, but I feel like it could be a huge proponent for something like this. If people can take whatever that looks like in each state, taking their tax dollars and saying, hey, I'm going to use it to go to this school, or I'm going I think it's going to be a huge game changer in the next few 3-5 years and what our country is going to look like. I don't know yet. I don't know if you know more. You probably know more about that than even I do for what it's looking like coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of school choice just because the public schools, traditional schools, I mean, I would put some private schools in that category as well. I think traditional schools have not stepped up to the plate. They haven't done their job in the last 100 years. If you look at the National Education Report Card that is congressionally funded, we have what, 32% proficiency in reading, 28 proficiency in math, 24% proficiency in civics. So if our whole job is to make sure we have an informed electorate and we have 24% proficiency in civics, even by their own standards, the system isn't working, right? But here's the thing. For the last decade, we've heard, and for longer than that, but we've heard people say it's not working. We need a change. We need reform. People keep using this word reimagine. And that's all well and good, but then you have to leave people with something. You can't just say things are horrible and then you go home to your poor child and you're like, oh, my only option is the school down the street and I don't know what to do. And I want to say two things about that. You do have the power to do something now. You do have the power to take the American Emergent Curriculum and the schoolhouse model and open it in your own town. You do have the ability to approach public schools and say, hey, let's try this. Maybe it's a small school district that is ready for something new. Let's try this. And in terms of the schoolhouse, it does cost money to go there today, but that is temporary. You know, our idea is that we are going to start to take this tuition closer to zero because we have a robust homeschool program or pod program that's opening in addition to the schoolhouse called the Schoolhouse Anywhere. And families across the nation, these 6 million families are going to be able to use that. And then that money flows back into the nonprofit to build schools across the country. So it's this great sustainable model that we've created, all fueled by parents and communities and smart political leaders who want to see a real change.
Oof, I'm down. I love it. Now, it made me think of something. Well, obviously, wasn't even thinking about two things. First question, have you heard or listened to the podcast Sold a Story?
No.
So they just, I think it launched in like October, November. Somebody who was like talking about the reading in America. And anybody listening, I would encourage you to go listen to that podcast, like 5 episodes or 6 episodes or something. And she just like saw like how our country's gotten, like where we are with reading and what you mentioned, like our numbers are so down with it and how they're taught to read and how these parents realized only when COVID happened, their kids were at home and they were hearing what was being taught and how it was being taught. And they were like, what? And so they interviewed parents who literally pulled their students out because of how they heard they were being taught and they weren't grasping reading and they thought they were. And it's just like when I didn't even know this because I was homeschooled my whole life. So there's a lot of things I just don't understand when I hear like, oh, I didn't know that. But they were talking about how like they read based on words. Like, hey, look at the page. What do you think that word would be based on the page? And they're like, oh, the cow is walking. It's probably back. I'm like, whoa, they're not talking about sounding out words. And it was just a really interesting podcast. Right. I was like, I'll mention it. So if anybody hasn't listened to that one, I actually thought it was very good. Opened my mind to a lot of things called Sold a Story. But I was just at a conference 2 weeks ago in Missouri at College of the Ozarks. Have you heard of them before?
Yes.
So their model is so interesting. I'm not saying that you would do this model with the schoolhouse, but when I heard about they have School of the Ozarks, College of the Ozarks, completely free education, college education, Christian education, and how they have different businesses that the students help run. The students have to work 15 hours a week, and that pays for their college tuition. And they have the hotel, they have a landscaping. The kids take care of like all these things. They have their own dairy, they make their own ice cream. And I'm like, that model is incredibly cool. Now, granted, they do have tons of donations that come in to help fund that thing, but teaching the students a trade or something they can learn that helps profit. I was like, man, what a cool model to have like a free option for college that I actually hadn't even known about until a couple months ago. But it made me think of you guys, like you're trying to do the same thing in a way of like, hey, if we can fund it on this side, it's going to help pass it on to people who are trying to go to a place.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we're doing a huge fundraising push in May, in about a month and a half, May of 2023, where we have people from around the country, including execs at Google, top executives saying the schoolhouse is the way to go. The American Emergent Curriculum is the way to go. And if you're going to put your money someplace, I understand there are big donors out there. We'd love to meet with Ken Langone. We think he's the guy who really gets this. But if you're going to put your money somewhere, and you're going to donate to Alzheimer's research, or you're going to donate to cancer research, and I understand all of that, and people have their passions, but 0 to 12 is where it starts. 0 to 12 is everything, right? Our character is formed by the time we're 6 years old. Morality is formed by the time we're 10. The elementary schools in this country are in a crisis. And if we can, now that we have the model, we know it works, we have the educator culture, we need people out there who are listening to say, I'm going to give $1 million to this cause. I'm going to give 10 million to this cause. I'm going to give 1,000 to this cause. And I'm going to fuel it because I understand what needs to happen in this country for things to change trajectory, for us to become the country that we always knew it was, right? Where people said hello to each other on the street and they know how to do things, and they graduated from high school knowing that there were endless possibilities in their future. We don't have that right now. We have a very disrupted society where we have pitted people against one another. And it's one of the things, I want to talk to the Ozark model in a minute, but one of the things I'm very proud of in terms of the American Emergent Curriculum and the schoolhouse is that we teach the good. Okay, from 0 to 12 years old, we want to teach that all human beings have fundamental needs. What are our fundamental needs? Well, we need to eat, and we need to house ourselves, and we need to clothe ourselves, and we need to communicate, and there's transportation. And that is true for all human beings, regardless of where you live. And then we start talking about, well, how do people fulfill these fundamental needs in different parts of the world? Well, in Ethiopia, they're going to fulfill them differently than in Florida, than in Alaska, than in Russia. And we start our cultural exploration from that point of view. In other words, your climate, your weather, your circumstances determines how you fulfill your fundamental needs. What does this do for children 0 to 12? It lets them know we're all in it together. We're all the same. We're all trying to live our lives and be great people and take care of our families. And the only difference are the circumstances that we're in. That is a lot different than teaching divisiveness from 0 to 12. I understand that there are hard conversations we have to have, but what I would suggest is that we have these hard conversations in middle school and high school. We don't give them the bad from 0 to 12, because if you're giving them the bad from 0 to 12, where do they have to go? Where's their faith in humanity? Where is their view of what human beings can do and what we can achieve? And we even start at the place of language and math. Who invented language and math? There was no language and math before human beings. How phenomenal that we all agreed that 1 is a 1 and 2 is a 2, and that we were all going to speak and communicate in a way that would allow our species to thrive. Those are the important things that we want to be giving our children. And just to go back to the Ozark model, which I love, we have a similar model in the schoolhouse in the AEC, which is school care, which is 5 children from each classroom every day take care of the school. So they leave their classroom, they do paint touch-ups, they recycle, they raise the flag with a veteran, they deliver the mail, they answer the phones. So they are there to really take care of their environment. And we only have 3 school rules at the schoolhouse. We've narrowed them down to just 3, and that's take care of yourself, take care of each other, take care of your school. And then we had a 4-year-old who I just loved to death said, and take care of the world. So maybe we're going to add a 4th. Yeah. Leave it to the 4-year-old to figure it all out. That's what I say.
I know they speak their mind too, and a lot of times it's mind blowing. So I love it. I know we have limited time, so I would love to jump through a few just random questions. I typically stick to those that are regular listeners. Now I stick to kind of the same model that I had run by you. So like, if you guys are speak of, and this could be the schoolhouse model or just in general, we've probably even touched on a couple of these already, just some different challenges maybe you guys are specifically up against, or you see the regular schools in America are kind of up against. If you were to kind of, it doesn't have to be 3, but just some challenges you see that you guys or somebody are up against right now.
Well, I'll answer that in 2 parts. One is, one of our goals at the schoolhouse was to solve all the problems of traditional education. And so a lot of those things have fallen by the wayside because we made a choice to be totally transparent. We actually operate on a system called Transparent Classroom. So parents can get in and see exactly what their children are doing every day. We have a curriculum that's available for parents to look at whenever they would like to. We're in constant communication with them. We don't call the principal's office admin, because that word is just despised by parents and educators alike. So we call it headquarters. We have a lot of whimsy and fun in our school. And so those things that are traditionally problems, and I could probably go on to name dozens of them, we've tried to cure in creating this model. We kind of sat back and said, oh, that's something people don't like about school. Let's change that. The second part to my answer is parent and school, educator and parent interaction is at an all-time low. And so I would put that at the very top of challenges. And here's why. You can't really blame parents. Well, you can a little. If they're not paying attention to what's going on in school, if they're not regularly emailing, if they're not showing up, or if they're bringing their baggage into school, those things are all counterintuitive to running a great learning environment. But over the last 60 years, schools have repeatedly been untruthful with parents. And so what that has created is a space between parents and teachers, or parents and administrators, right? There's no trust there anymore. So if you go to Reggio Emilia in Italy and you look at a parent-teacher conference, the parents show up and they're like, oh my gosh, tell me all about my child, and you're amazing, and thank you for taking care of, and I can't wait to learn from you, and what can I bring home with me? I mean, it is a very loving conversation. I don't need to tell you how parent-teacher conferences go or conversations go here in America, which is there's this divide. There are educators who feel underappreciated and overworked, who are trying to communicate with parents, and there are parents who feel like all around them, schools aren't being truthful with them. They're not being transparent. And that's a very, very difficult thing to overcome. I think we do well at the schoolhouse with that because of our transparency. But if you don't have that triangle where the points are the parent, the educator, and the child all working together, it's very difficult to educate the whole child, because then you have this discrepancy of what happens at home and what happens at school. And it's something that we work really hard to maintain at our school and to develop.
And I love that you're not hiding. Like, it's, and obviously, maybe there's some schools that are, but you're not hiding, like, hey, this is who we are. Like, please ask us,
Yes.
please be there. Because that's how my wife and I are. Like, I want to know what's going on. I want to be a part of it. I know when the school my son goes to, like, they asked one time, they're like, hey, we need crickets for the pet frog, or we need flowers for cutting. I'm like, okay, like, here, like, I want to try and be a part of it and help in any way we can, because this is my child. Like, I want to be a part of what he's learning and know what he's learning.
Well, right. And also, you want your parents to be ambassadors for what you're doing. So we spend a lot of time just talking to parents. They'll ask us questions. Well, why did you decide to cover this? Why did you decide to bring the story of SALT or the story of Great Britain? And how are you walking through that? How are you approaching the curriculum content on Kenya when you're studying Kenya? All of these things we want to impart to them in a way that they understand the root of why we've developed the curriculum this way. And so they can go out and talk about what their child is learning in a brave, literate way, right? Because here's the thing that happens when you have something new, when you have something great, like what we're doing, and you go out into the community, you're going to have parents, grown-ups saying, well, I don't know, are they going to learn how to read? Are they going to learn how to do math? I don't know. I went to public school and I turned out okay. And I always laugh when people say that. Are we okay? I mean, I don't think we're okay. I don't think we as a collective society have turned out okay. I think we could be a lot nicer. We could be a lot smarter about solving problems. But my point is, we want to give parents the ammunition, so to speak, the academic ammunition to say, no, this is the root of it. This is why we learn math when children are in first grade using tactile materials, because math is an abstract concept. There is no three, right? There's three of something, but there is no three. So when children are learning, you want to make sure that they have that tactile experience before they go on into the abstract. Okay, so when we say that to a parent, they go, oh my gosh, I can pass that along. And that parents are your best asset, but we don't, in general, in our society, we don't have that connectivity, and we're changing that at the schoolhouse for sure.
Well, I love that you touched on the thing that it's a pet peeve of my wife and I, where people use that argument and they're like, "Oh, I turned out okay." You hear it all the time, and I'm like, "Whose standard are we like comparing this to?" Like, I turned out okay. Like, I'm pretty sure we could all be better. Like, all be better in something, and that's like, oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I love that you touched on that because it makes me laugh anytime I do hear somebody say that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure we could all be better. What do you see going really good? What's going really good? And in maybe the schoolhouse, or maybe you see different schools doing things, you're like, man, that's going in the right direction.
Well, I can tell you at the schoolhouse, the thing that I'm proud of a lot of things, as you can tell, and we work really hard. We work really hard. I don't think there's anyone in the United States that works harder on behalf of children in a school environment than our team, because every single day we're improving. And before I get into that, I had a conversation the other day with the team and educators who are out there listening will appreciate this. We change things mid-year. And so for any educator who is in a traditional environment, for their principal or the head of school to come in and say, you know what, it's February, but we're going to make this change. I've been told that that is the end of the world for educators, right? They're on a roll. Hey, let's just start this next September, when we have the summer to think about it and implement it. So I gave a speech the other day where I talked about 0 to 12. And I think most people listening to this, if not all people, would agree that 0 to 12 is it, right? This is where the formation happens. And so I asked the crowd to amortize for me if 0 to 12 is considered a lifetime for a child. Let's say that's their lifetime of 0 to 80. Amortize what 3 months would be. What is the 3-month equivalent for that? Okay, so it took everybody about 10 minutes to figure out that algebra, but it ends up being 4 years. 3 months ends up being 4 years of time for them at the most critical stage of their life. So between now and May or June, we shouldn't change anything. If we know it's better for the child, of course we should change what we need to change. And in this instance, I wanted to give them a little bit more choice. I wanted to organize the way that they're presented information a little bit more like a graphic organizer so that it was clearer to them. And I wanted them to be able to take pauses after they had accomplished something big so that they were ready and excited about going on to the next thing. Those are the changes. But they have to be done immediately because we don't have time to waste when it comes to children. So this is all to say that the thing that I think is going really well at the schoolhouse is the educator culture. Number one, because the teachers here, they skip to work. They run up the stairs every morning. They can't wait to come to work. They can't wait to be with their colleagues. They can't wait to see the children. This didn't happen overnight, by the way. This wasn't some magic dust. This was taking educators who, again, had slight PTSD from where they had come from, didn't feel that they were on a team. People misuse that word all the time. Didn't feel that they were being heard, didn't feel that they had leaders that were bringing the very best out of them. And we changed all of that through the last 5 years to where educators now are our biggest advocates. They're willing to listen to us saying, hey, let's change this thing mid-February in the year and let's rock and roll on it because it's for the child. And that is one of those things, Mitch, that we really have to look at in terms of spreading this message and in terms of changing education or bringing the new American school to the United States. The educators themselves are beat down, they're disrespected. I can't tell you how many times I have a conversation and they say, oh, in my last school, we had professional development and it was an hour of someone droning on about paperwork and filling in bubbles. And these are the smartest people I know, by the way. They're also the most organized people I know. I mean, if you know teachers, they are phenomenal. And we have marginalized that profession to a place that is just really, really sad. And I hope every one of them either starts a schoolhouse or comes to work for us. I really do, because our professional development meetings, I mean, they look like Tony Robbins in his heyday. You know what I mean? I mean, we are rocking and rolling when it comes to children. And that's our focus. And that's what teachers love. That's why they're teachers.
Man, I love that you don't waste any time and you guys are jumping right in, because that's 3 months is 4 years. And that's huge. And that's, and you see how fast kids grow up. They grow up incredibly fast and they're sponges. I mean, that probably speaks to that. Like, they pick up things so quickly in what they say. And so I love that. I'm glad you guys don't waste any time with it. And with your schoolhouse, I think you said you go all the way to then 12, or do you guys go into like middle school and then you're done at high school? And is there a goal to go all the way through high school?
Well, here are my feelings on this. 0 to 12 is really the core. That's the core. These are sensitive periods and character development times in a child's life that are fundamental in order to build the foundation of a happy, healthy, productive human being. That's what we need to nail. And I do not see, I mean, I've checked out over 60 elementary schools just in the last 60 days, 80 days, somewhere around there. And I can't believe what elementary schools are still doing. They are not at all aligned to what's happening in a child's life. We know from 3 to 6, it's all about language. It's all about movement, right? It's all about order. So how can you have a dirty classroom with posters that are way up on the ceiling, covered in bulletin boards with primary colors, with plastic for them to handle? It's the most sensorial that a human being will ever be. So we need to create classrooms that are aligned with that. From 6 to 12, which includes 9, this is the time for imagination. This is the time for the reasoning mind and abstract concepts, and everything you present to them should be in the form of stories. Wow, it's the story of the universe. It's the story of the coming of life and biology. It's the story of writing, to get them engaged and to get them excited about what they're learning. So I don't see schools aligning with that. And that's one of the things that's really, it bothers me. It bothers me because there's so many children that we're not able to touch quite yet. In terms of continuing on, I mean, I would love to eventually do a 7th and 8th and of course go into a high school, but I'm not as concerned about those age groups. I mean, high school, less so. Middle school, yes. Going to 8th grade, I think would be phenomenal, because I don't know that we do our best in terms of middle school. Our middle school curriculum is already written, so it's there.
Okay.
We just haven't implemented it yet because we're constantly expanding and looking at space for all these kids. And middle schoolers, they need to be out in the world, right? They need to be working, they need to be volunteering. If they did high focused academics Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they did an elite sport or service project on Monday, and on Fridays they worked, they interned, they learned new things to become an entrepreneur or productive member of our society, these children would be flourishing. The thing from 12 years old to 18 is you've now gone from looking inward to your community and your family to looking outward. And if you don't give them something to do, what do they do with that outward facing energy? It goes to their phones. It goes into trouble. It goes into social situations that they shouldn't be in. It goes into depression. It goes into anxiety. So the answer is yes, but I'd rather see the schoolhouse from 0 to 12 be everywhere in the country and then expand from there.
Okay. Love it. Well, I love this conversation. I was in with the same question, and it's asking if you'd share one piece of advice with the educators and school leaders that are listening. If you could do one, what would that one piece of advice be for them?
I would say go to the schoolhouse.org. I would say look at our curriculum. I would say look at what we've done with educator culture. Look at what we've built in New York. New York is the most difficult state in which to build a school. Look at what we've done with our parent community. Look at our children who are graduating from our elementary school and are grade levels ahead. Take a look at what we're doing. Consider donating to the nonprofit. Consider taking this curriculum and putting it into your district, into your school. Consider building a school, because if all of us are sitting here and we're looking at what's happening on the news and what's happening with our neighborhoods and our communities, you need to put that energy someplace. You need to feel like you're making a difference. And it's very hard to look at the screen these days and listen to what's happening and not feel depressed over it and not feel powerless. But the truth of the matter is, Mitch, we're not powerless. We're human beings. We're Americans. We're not powerless. We can do this. And now we have a model where people can replicate this and they can take control in a beautiful, non-political way that helps your community and that helps the next generation of Americans in this country.
I love it. I love it. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation. I know we could talk for most likely hours pretty easily.
Yes, we
but
could.
we got to make sure it's not too long where people actually will listen to the podcast episode and not get like overwhelmed with how. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you've done, for like you take your whole career and then you pivot and to get into education and do it so recently. And you're in 5 years of having the school. And so thank you for what you're doing for pouring into the next generation, because I think you're going to see, and people even after you are going to see a lasting impact from what the sacrifices you and your husband and your family have made to do this. And I'm looking forward to watching it grow and hopefully take charge here in the United States. So thank you, Mimosa, for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Mitch. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Mimosa for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what she's doing with her school, and I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. And I'm looking for them to spread to all 50 states and to continue to grow. And I'm looking forward to seeing them do that. If you guys are looking to get involved with her and her school, you can check them out online, theschoolhouse.org. I know she mentioned that on the podcast, but theschoolhouse.org, go connect over there and learn more about what they're doing. If you guys are a school listening to this and you're looking for ways to grow enrollment, maybe automate some things or add some tech to your school and you're maybe stuck or struggling with that, I'd love you to reach out to us. You can find us online, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We have some great resources for you over there, and those are actually just continuing to grow as we roll some more out later this year in 2023. So get connected over there. We have a private Facebook group we'd love you to join in the meantime. Hopefully you're a Facebook user, but you can find us online, School Success Makers on Facebook, private group just for school leaders. We'd love to see you in there. I'm personally in there. I'd love to personally see you in there as well. We'll be back here next week, as always, with another amazing guest on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.